Hello, welcome back to the Appraisal Doctor. This is where you get all your appraisal questions answered. I am Dr. Aria A. Wilson, PhD in Urban Planning, Certified Residential Appraiser. If this is your first time on this channel, welcome. And if you are a regular subscriber, welcome back and stick around for this week's question. This week's question is, how do I know that the appraiser has arrived at a market value when he is using different approaches? Now, that question is a very good question. And the reason why I wanted to take care of that question in this week's episode, it's because the market value is the opinion of value that the appraiser typically ends up with at the end of his engagement. Now, the different routes that can be taken to arrive at market value is where it gets a little muddled. Now, we have spoken about the different approaches to value. We have spoken about the sales comparison approach. We've spoken about the cost approach, also the income approach. Now, with all these different approaches, how do we reflect market value? Now, in the perfect world, a market value can be defined as where demand meets supply. The perfect way of explaining that, the perfect illustration of this is when you have a buyer and you have a seller. Now, not in every marketplace there is a buyer and a seller and a closed transaction or two to fall back on or to use as supporting evidence to the opinion of value of the appraiser. First things first, I always speak to the sales comparison approach as the approach that would be likely appreciated by an appraiser in any assignment. But we do not live in a perfect world, and not many market areas support transactions that are recent, that can actually prove what the market is in terms of the market value. Now, what am I talking about? If you are in a market where there is loads of sales, meaning many buyers are buying, and this typically happens in a residential market, especially in a subdivision or in an area where there are multiple subdivisions, an urban residential area or a suburb where many people try to buy their homes. Now, in those situations and in those geographical areas, you will have multiple transactions, and those markets are called very active markets. Now, in these very active markets, we have a lot of transactions. These transactions can be used to arrive at what the market value is for a particular property being appraised in that vicinity. Now, when we are in vicinities that are not as active with sales, so we don't have many closed transactions, we may need to look into other approaches. Now, there might be geographical locations that do not have a lot of sales comparisons that fit the subject property. So there might be transactions, there might be sales, but the properties are not necessarily similar or comparative to the one that the appraiser is tasked with to value. If you are given an assignment where the house that you are appraising, and let's stay residential for simplicity of this example, the house that you have been asked to appraise by, say, the bank or the courts or wherever, this property might have been one that has been owned by a husband and a wife, a family, and there might be a dissolution of marriage. In that scenario, we may end up with an assignment where the house has been expanded, there are a lot of custom-built features to the home, and really and honestly, it cannot be compared with transactions that are available in the geographical vicinity. What do we do in this scenario? We are going to approach it from a cost approach. Now, this cost approach will determine the market value. So we're using different approaches to arrive at the market value. We're using different approaches to arrive at the opinion of value by the appraisal. Using a cost approach, what is happening here and what qualifies that approach to bring you to a market value is that you're going to use what we would describe as the market cost. What do I mean by that? The cost to build, the cost to expand on that residence in the market. So for example, if there was a pool added to the structure, a pool added to the property, for example, how much is it to build a pool in that market area? We would now arrive at the cost of building a pool in the market, and we are now with a market cost to build. What does that mean? It means that we have arrived at the cost of building that pool within the market. What the market dictates that it costs to add a pool to your home. Now, when we would have done all the research for whatever additions and custom built features in this home, then we are able to say, all right, this is the additional cost. This is what was spent in addition to what the base value would be. Then there can be some element of what is the value after spending? What is the value, the market overall value after calculating the market cost? So we are coming towards the same answer using a different approach. We are going to multiply whatever the cost per square foot it is that is used to build a pool, or whatever cost per square foot it is to add the new kitchen or the new bathroom or whatever the custom feature is. What is the per square foot value to build? What is the per square foot cost to build? And when you would have found that cost to build, then we can determine what is the contributory value to the overall value of the home. Now, that can get a little technical. That's for the appraiser to be tasked with. But the point that we are making is that we can use the cost approach to arrive at the market value. We are looking at what it is to rent this income property in the market. What is the market rent? What are we looking at? Another value market expression. Let's call it that. The income approach is an approach through rental information, through rental data to arrive at a market value. The income is a percentage of the overall value, and with understanding the yields in that particular market, we can do the research. We can do the research to find out what is the market rent in that market, and we capitalize by a yield that is appropriate, and we will arrive at a capital value, which is the opinion of value by the appraiser. Let's recap. We can arrive at a market value by the sales comparison approach, which we discussed in detail in last week's episode. So you can view last week's episode. I will leave a link in the description box so you can recap details of the sales comparison approach from last week. And you can also understand that number two, so we have number one, the sales comparison approach, which takes us to the market value. Number two, we have the cost approach, which also takes us to a market value with a different way of doing it. And number three, we have the income approach, that we approach the market value through rental research, through rental information within the same market. I hope I have answered the question. How does an appraiser arrive at market value through different approaches? How do we know that using different approaches to value takes us to that same market value? I hope I've answered your question today, and I hope you will join us again next week. If you have any questions that came up from watching this episode, please feel free to ask these questions in the comment section, and I hope you will consider subscribing if you are not yet a subscriber to this channel. And I am the Appraisal Doctor. Any questions you have, you can ask them right here. We will handle them. See you next week.